Now, what's the point of these calls? Instead of me teaching you a class on a particular topic, instead I want to help you a bit more closely, and I want to answer your questions. I want to coach you through problems that you might be stuck on. Now, it could be the case that not all of you have a question today. I'm going to try and get through as many questions and problems as I possibly can. We have about an hour, so we should be able to tackle quite a lot of stuff, right? Walker, no worries if you're late. Welcome. So if any of you do have a question, you can just put the letter Q in the chat, and I'm just going to go to each person that puts Q, and I'm just going to answer your questions one by one, okay? I recommend that if you're going to put Q, if you're going to ask me a question, you should be comfortable with unmuting yourself and talking, because I do want to actually talk to you guys. And by the way, if you'd rather just lurk, if you'd rather just listen, that's also completely fine. You don't have to get super involved today. If you just want to listen in, that's fine. Now, just so that you guys know, where am I getting the answers from that I'm giving you? This is not something that we started doing like yesterday. This has actually been my full-time job for the last 5 years. We've been coaching people like this. We've been running groups like this. We've been helping people edit their work. So what I'm doing is drawing on all of the experience that I've had over nearly 300 books. I think it's 280 something as of this week. And so that's the experience that I'm drawing on when I'm giving you these answers. All right. So let's get stuck in. Angela, you want to start off? You're welcome to unmute yourself. And what's your question?
Hello, Max. How is everyone today and you?
Really good. Hopefully everyone's good.
Oh, good. I do
Yeah.
have a question.
Okay.
I am writing two different novels, and I think they're both commercial fiction. They're either suspense fiction or psychological
Okay.
thriller. I'm not sure which yet at this point. But my
Okay.
question is on chapter length.
Yeah.
While writing my chapters, I'm noticing that my length is going from like 3,000 to 5,000, and I'm like, I think that's too long. It's going to
Uh-huh.
slow the pace down. So my question is, because I have one protagonist and five main characters,
Uh-huh.
um, I'm devoting a chapter to each main character. The protagonist
Mhm.
is chapter one. And
Uh-huh.
then each character is going to have their own chapter dedicated to them. But
Okay.
I want to bring the protagonist in by doing a chapter break at the end of each one of their chapters to keep him in the loop. Because it's all about dreams and he's a dream walker. So
So
he's connected. So can I split like one of the character chapters into two chapters? Is that what I would do?
so just to get some context. So
Mhm.
you said you had five main characters, is that right?
Right. He gets sucked into five strangers' dreams,
Oh wow.
and they all become like unlikely heroes in a dream world.
Are
Um,
these different chapters? So do you have five points of view in the book?
I'm keeping it in third person,
Huh?
but like after the protagonist chapter, it's in third. Then I go to the first character, he gets sucked into the dream, but it's about her. So it's all about her from a patient psychiatrist point of view, because he's a psychiatrist.
And
Um,
just to clarify, so is the
uh,
chapter written in the point of view of the character that's dreaming, or are they all
yes.
are okay, all right. So they're actually, but the protagonist is there, but it's not seen through the protagonist's eyes, it's seen through the eyes of the dreamer.
Right. But at the end of her chapter, the first character, I want to bring him back in because they share a dream at the end. And I just want to bring like a paragraph or two of that in at the end of each character's chapter to keep him in the loop, you know?
Yeah, okay.
Um,
You might find, okay, so this was not your question actually, but you might find that it's difficult to keep the thread of the protagonist's journey if you're
mhm.
moving to different characters' perspectives all the time. But that's a question for another time because that's more like a story structure question. So just to answer
Right.
the question that you actually asked, you were asking about chapter length, right?
hmm
Were
Chapter
you,
length.
were you asking if 5,000 words is too long?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all right. I actually want to ch change the way you see the question a tiny bit. And
Okay.
it's not so much about the length of the chapters themselves, and it's more about how engaging what's happening is. Because
Hmm.
you can imagine, right, that you have a chapter that's only 1,000 words long, but it's not
Hmm.
interesting, right? Can you
Gotcha.
can you also imagine that you have a chapter that's 5,000 words long and it's like really gripping and you can't put it down? Right?
That's the way I'm writing this because she's
Yeah,
having like two or three different dreams, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, so I actually think that how engaging the story is, the setup of the story, what's happening in any given chapter, that's a lot more important than the length of the chapters. But that's not really giving you a practical answer. So the practical answer is try to keep them more or less consistent
Hmm.
so that you don't have a radically short one and then a really long one and then a really short one. If you can keep them fairly even, this is a nice rhythm because you can imagine that if somebody's reading your book before bed, they're hoping to go into a dream of their own pretty soon, you know?
Right.
Like, and this is what I do. I usually read before I go to sleep. It's
I do
nice.
too.
It's nice if the chapters are more or less a predictable length because I know if I read just one more chapter, I know roughly how long it's going to be, and then I can go to sleep afterwards. So, for the sake of the reader experience, if they're 5,000 words, 3,000 to 5,000, that length is fine.
Hmm.
Try to keep all of them 3,000 to 5,000, and that should make for a good reading experience.
And
But
keep the pace going in it.
it's the pace of the story itself that matters a lot more than the word count of the chapters. Yeah.
Okay. Well, mine is so complicated. That's the only way I could figure out how to split all the characters up. So you get to learn
Yeah.
a little bit about them before
Yeah.
they all come together, midway in the book.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
yeah,
All
it's
right.
been difficult, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And Sonia said that answers her question as well, so that's perfect. Thanks, Angela. That was a great question, Angela. Then Nancy, you had a question? Well, what did you want to ask, Nancy?
Okay. This is kind of a strange thing. I'm so new to this anyway,
No problem.
but I knew exactly where my story was going. I've got not a detailed outline, but an outline. I knew what was going to be happening. And
Yeah.
in middle of working on this chapter, and it's where my character, the 15-year-old, is on a bus, and she's kind of a sheltered person,
Uh-huh.
and she's upset, and she's meeting different people on the bus and wishing they just leave her alone.
Okay.
And she's being sent to her grandparents who she's never met.
Okay.
And I knew where all of this was going. And then
Yeah.
she meets this one character, and it's supposed to be just a young boy, about 20, 21, a little bit older than her. And
Okay.
he's kind of like an old fashioned Jesus freak kid, and he kind of freaks her out. But, um, and then as I'm writing, he kind of takes over the
Yeah.
conversation and goes in directions I didn't intend to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started thinking about it after then, and now I'm considering taking the story in a whole different direction.
Uh-huh.
I have a tendency to think of things in darker tones anyway. And
Yeah.
now I'm looking at possibly going in a cult direction instead of the whole direction my story was going to go.
Okay.
And I really don't know what to do.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're asking, should you head in the more exciting new direction, or should you just stick to the original plan that you had? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because I knew exactly what I was going to do on the other one.
Yeah, yeah. Um, is this new direction for the story more exciting, more interesting, more fun for you?
I think so, but I'm
Yeah,
going to have to spend a lot more time research. I mean, it's really going to slow me down, but
that could be
I
okay.
think it could be.
Yeah, because I think the speed at which you finish the book is less important than how happy you are with the story. You know, that's got to be the main thing. And I'll tell you something else. The reader can really feel how excited you are as the author about the story that you're telling. Can you imagine if you wrote a book that you had absolutely no interest in? You could probably drag yourself through doing it, but you think the reader's going to find it very engaging? Probably not, right? So if you're feeling more excited about this new direction, I think your excitement about it will translate into the writing itself, and it'll make for a better story. I
I,
reckon.
I liked the other story. It was going to be fun to write,
Yeah.
but I don't know. There's something about this that is really intriguing me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think follow your excitement with the story. And
Okay.
by the way, this will probably happen to everybody at some point, that the book will evolve a little bit. It'll start to evolve into something that was a little bit different to what you originally intended, and
Uh,
that's
this
fine.
is this is 100% different.
100% different, maybe even 100% different, but that's fine because if the new direction is more exciting, more interesting for you, the author, like we said, that's going to translate into the reading experience. You're going to come out with a better book. You should follow your instincts on this one.
I think I'll explore that.
Let's do it. All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That was a great question. Thank you. All right, then Therese, you can let me know if I'm saying your name the right way, and
Yeah.
also let me know what the question is.
Or you can call me Terry. It's
Terry,
Therese. Yeah.
Therese. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I have well, I've decided to use third person
Mhm.
closed with my story, slipping into first person with thoughts and journal entries, that kind of thing. But my
Okay.
question has to do with starting my story.
Yeah.
I'm working on a story about teenagers, and I wondered, can I put, okay, so it's like exposition at the beginning,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I want to start the story with one of the main characters. I have two of them, and one of the main characters sitting there after the inciting incident and how he's feeling and his introduction to the change.
Hmm.
And can I do that and then kind of slip into the what happened before, like establishing what was normal,
Do you
or
mean, sorry to interrupt. Do you mean you're kind of starting with the bang of the inciting incident and then you're going back to show us what led up to it?
yeah, can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any reason why not.
And then if I'm writing it in third person, can I slip between third person closed and omniscient in this process, or would it be better not to?
This I would maybe not advise you to do. And again, it's not a rule I'm giving you. Could you like from scene to scene change from third person limited, and then the next scene it's omniscient, and then the next scene it's third limited again? There's no rule against it. Do you really need to though? Slash, is it going to help your chances of publishing this and having an audience for it? I would leave omniscient alone unless you got a really good intentional reason to use it. Here's the thing, most of the people that we see using omniscient are using it because they haven't got the hang of limited. And so they want an easy way to be able to show us what's going on in the different characters' heads, right?
I
But
do, I
yeah,
do.
yeah, but this is not a good reason to use third-party
Ah,
omniscient. It's much better if you can get the hang of the limited POV and try to show us how the other characters are feeling or what they might be thinking, based on their behavior, their choices, their expressions. Or maybe you show us by changing to their limited POV in the next scene, right?
so I could do that?
Yeah.
Because what I want to do is introduce a second character. So I'm looking at third person limited with this first character who just went through his inciting incident. And then I want to introduce a second character, but there are many things that she does
Mhm.
that are not explicit. They're implied. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to work that in there without slipping into a godlike state.
Yeah, I got you. So the question is, what would justify adding another point of view to the book, basically? And
Yeah.
I would say,
Yeah.
take a look at all of the characters and ask yourself, would this could I get everything across to the reader that I want to get across without this character's point of view? And if the answer is no, there'd be something missing.
Yeah.
Then I would say let's add another point of view. But keep all of the points of view limited would be my advice. So maybe in chapter 1, we have one of the teenagers, and then in chapter 2, it's a different teenager's perspective. And now we've got both of their thoughts and feelings, but not mushed into the same scene. We're keeping them delineated. They're separate from each other, right?
Okay, so because I have two main characters and it's an interplay between them. And so what I want to do is, because when it comes to the climax, it affects both of them. So I want to make sure I make the connection between my characters.
Yeah.
So there is some, because I was trying to do, like somebody earlier said, a chapter for this character, a chapter for this character. I can't justify that because it's all interconnected
Okay.
in what I'm doing. And so if I keep it limited to 2 point of views, those 2 main characters, think that might work?
Well, it doesn't actually have to be separated by chapter. It just has to be separated by scene. So what I mean by that is chapter 1 could have both perspectives in it, but they have to be they have to be separated, right? And you can separate them with just line break. Let me show you real quick.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to do that.
I'll show you just a second.
Okay, I'm new to this.
Yeah. Draw. I'm trying to find a whiteboard, just a second. So we could do it like this. Nope, not that. Here we go. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Can we see this? Can we see the board I'm sharing?
Yes. Yeah.
So we could do something like this, right? You have everything that happens to teenager 1
Mhm,
in third person limited.
mhm.
And then you have a line break. You
Oh,
have everything that happens to teen 2,
oh, got it. Yeah.
also
That's the
limited.
line break.
Yep. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by a line break.
Got it. Okay.
If you do that, then you could actually technically have both of their perspectives in chapter 1. Right? This could be over here, chapter 1, right? And then you can do the same thing in chapter 2, and so on. And you
Okay.
can do them like that. Now, this would be a skillful way to handle
You froze.
the limited perspective to the omniscient perspective, because actually you're trying to do this but just haven't got the hang of it yet. So I would suggest that you experiment around with this and try to get the hang of it. And a good reason to use omniscient is as an intentional technique. You don't want to fall back on it because it's easier, right? Because it's so rare in modern fiction that if you were to use it, it would feel very experimental, especially for a young adult novel, which I think is what you're writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Does that answer the question, Therese?
It does. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. Then Lena, you're up next. How can I help?
Hi, hear me?
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
hear you.
I'm not used to using this thing.
That's okay.
I'm really enjoying the writing, but the times that you have them scheduled are right in the middle of my work shift.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there's any more options other than the 12 o'clock or
There will be.
1 o'clock and
There will be.
10 o'clock. There will be?
Yeah, there will be, yeah. We're just in the process of bringing more admins on board and finding more people that can run sprints at different times. So there are going to be more options added in American time zones over the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it. This is the first time doing writing sprints, and
Yeah.
I amazed myself when I did the 7 to 11.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You can get a lot done just sitting down for an hour with everybody. So
Yeah. It's just that when I was 10 p.m. and I have to get up at 5 a.m.
yeah. No
So,
worries. We're gonna add more options in the next couple of weeks. So it's on the way.
okay. I was wondering. So, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lena.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Then Adrian. Amazing.
Hi.
Amazing job with running said sprints that Lena was just talking about.
Thank you.
How's it going? And what's the question?
So it's going well, and I wanted to make sure I put it in the chat, but I wanted to let Lena know I'm gonna try to work on adding some like more afternoon sprints in Pacific time for people who can make that, and then I think it'd just be like late hours for those in Britain.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, absolutely. So I've had so much great help from people in the group. That even just this month, just getting feedback from some specific scenes where I was struggling, specifically in my introduction scene. I have gotten sort of like multiple kinds of feedback for this. There's a lot of things that I have to create because I'm doing a fantasy story. And so I've got world building, and I don't start with sort of like the urban part of it. I started in the fairy part of it. So I wanted to know, like, you're familiar with my story, and I have this magical element called flets, right? Which nobody knows what they are until I explain what they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've come up with a good way to introduce them.
Okay.
But it's not until like, 400 or 500 words in.
Okay.
So I wondered if you had any like specific feedback for like, this is like, you need to have, these completely new elements. You need to like give us an in like right here or in this first, part or.
Yeah. I mean,
So
they
there's
don't.
that. And then go ahead.
I was going to answer the question, but there might be more. So let me let you finish.
Oh, I also wanted to ask about my antagonist. Like, how soon do I need to bring that guy on board?
Okay, so the questions are kind of linked. It's like, how early should you bring in the world building stuff, the important world building stuff, and how early to bring in the antagonist? Okay, so this is just generic fantasy advice. There's a lot for the reader to catch up with. Like when they enter your world, especially a world like yours that's not like generic, like Tolkien stuff, but it's really like very much your own thing. So there's a lot of catching up to do. So the elements that engage people are conflict, mystery, and feeling connected to the character, right? If you can do a little bit of that first, and let us form enough of a connection that we care. Once we care, that's a good time to start introducing things that are a little bit more complicated. So I can't give you a word count because it doesn't really work like that. I can't say like in the first 300 words or something. But try to just establish that emotional connection. So we care about Petrick. There's some sort of conflict that Petrick is caught in, and that's got our attention. Or maybe there's some kind of mystery that Petrick is already getting entangled in the first pages. I think you do. I think I glimpsed your new opening. There is a little bit of conflict in there, right?
Yeah.
The conflict is good. Once the reader cares about Petrick, now we're invested enough emotionally that we can start to discover more about your world and all of the other things that you want to explain to us. And that would be a good time to start to explain what a flet is and how it works and so on. What was your idea for how to introduce the flet concept?
So right now, Petrick is, I start him staring down a tree, which why is the tree an antagonist in any way, right? But that's part of like the fun of it. And the beginning is like, he's like, I'm going to climb this tree and I'm going to make it happen. So he goes up there and he finally gets in after some banter with his friend. And once he's up there, he catches sight of a flet. And so then we just get like a little mini glimpse of it out of the corner of his eye. But then he's like chasing it around the tree. And now we know how big it is. And we know how, what color it is. And we know what it's made of. And we know that he wants it, but we don't really know why. And we're not really, and he's got a bag to carry it in. And so, that's how I'm doing it right now.
Okay, that sounds really good. That sounds
Okay.
really good. Yeah, I like that. And also, it feels so organic, the way that you've introduced it. It's like it's not being exposition dumped on us, but we get to meet one, so we know what it is, right? Yeah, way better.
Yeah.
Way better.
The exposition part of it's like my worst fear. I just really don't want to do that.
Yeah. No, this sounds perfect, honestly. And for anyone that's ever worried about the whole showing not telling thing, which is what an exposition dump is, it's just a load of telling, right? Always try to think about your book as if it was a movie. Like if this was a movie, how would I explain what a flet is? How would I show the audience what a flet is? So that's good, Adrienne. And then other thing you're asking about was antagonist. Is your antagonist a close antagonist? So we're regularly running into the person themselves, or is it like a distant Voldemort style antagonist where it's like more of a puppet master?
It'll be kind of close. Not throughout the whole story, but you know, since he's sort of the reason for all the chaos and the things Pedrick has to do anyway, you know, we don't need to know him like deeply right now. In fact, we may never know his backstory in this story, but we do need to know that like he knows things that other people don't know, and I don't know. Right now, do you mind if I kind of share how I'm thinking about doing this?
Yeah.
Right now I have Petrick in the tree, and he's going to have a run-in with some other sprites. We're going to like launch him over the treetops, and he's going to land somewhere else. And when he climbs down that tree, he's going to run into the antagonist.
Okay.
And this will be like probably still within the first chapter.
Nice.
And then he will have a conversation, because we don't know Petrick that well. We don't know why, but what we find out is that something that he says in the conversation alerts the antagonist to him being a threat. And so now things kind of shift. So we've already established him as a really like a very visual character. Like he's got some specific things that he does with like his face and stuff. And things will shift a little bit, which Petrick will catch on to, but not enough to know to be scared of him.
This, and I think you've already answered the question. If the antagonist is like there from the first chapter, I have no concerns about it being early enough. Like you can't even get the right? That's plenty early enough. As a guideline for anyone else that's wondering about this, the first act, so the first third of the book, that's probably a good time to introduce the antagonist. And the reason why is because ideally you want to kind of set the table. All of the story elements should be introduced in about the first third of the book. So who's the main character? What points of view are we going to be using? Who's the antagonist? What's the goal? You know, all of these kinds of basic story building blocks. If the antagonist is being introduced later than the first third of the story, there better be a good reason why. If you think of something like Harry Potter, we don't meet Voldemort until all the way at the end, but we do hear about him from right at the beginning, right? He who should not be named. And we also have chaos happening at the school that is actually being caused by Voldemort, even though we don't know it until it all comes together at the end. So, but yeah, does that answer the questions? Great.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks. Keep crushing it and keep posting as well, because we want to read more. All right, great. Okay. Walker, you're just listening. That's no problem. And Eric, how's it going, Eric? What's your question?
It's going good, thank you. My novel is a coming of age / coming home story. Okay, so every other chapter, the way it's currently structured, every other chapter, one is present, okay, first person present, and then it goes to first person past.
Okay.
The flashback about him growing up.
Sure.
Okay. Now, when I show people my individual chapters, I get good feedback. Okay. I get good feedback. They like to read it. They like to write it.
Yeah.
Okay. But I lose people along the way. When they're putting it all together, I'm losing people.
Yeah.
Now I've gone back and I've rewritten a couple things. You know, first of all, the present day story is not as engaging as the past story.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And it really can't be, because one is 18 years of things happening, and the other one is a few days.
Yeah.
Okay. Or, you know, maybe a month.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But it has to be stretched out over the whole book.
Sure.
Now I've considered just doing it sequentially instead of having it alternate side by side. But I don't think the present story is engaging enough to stand on its own.
Sure. So is the question to structure the book?
Right. So that my problem is the structure of the book. And it's a huge problem, and I really don't even know how to address it.
Okay. I can give you some ideas. My annoying answer is going to be I'd probably need to read it to really give you like detailed advice on it. But the basic version of what I would do right now, how much of the book is the present timeline? Like if let's say the past is 60% and the present is 40%, what's that balance?
Yeah, it's probably now 70-30.
70-30. Okay.
One of the things that I did do was I allowed myself to have, I don't keep them equal in terms of number of chapters that are in the past. I allowed past chapters to be together.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That way people are more immersed in the more interesting story.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll have chapter 1 be the present, and then 2 and 3 are the past.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. All right. So the book's 70% past and 30% present. And the present timeline, it's less engaging, I'm guessing, because number one, the engaging events are mostly in the past. And number two, have you heard this term framing narrative? Okay, so to me, it sounds like that's kind of what your book is doing, is that you have the bulk of the story is like everything that's happening in the past. This is like most of the book, right? And then around it, the present is just like a picture frame, if that makes sense, right? I'm trying to think of another story that does this. Okay, this is not in the same genre. Did you ever watch that movie, The Never-Ending Story, by any chance?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Do you remember in that movie? Actually, let me use a different one. Princess Bride. Did you ever see that? Yeah,
Great
yeah.
book.
An awesome one, right? That's an example of a framing narrative. Most of the story that's happening, if you watch the movie, I believe there's someone telling the story of the Princess Bride, right? But the entire actual book with all of the exciting stuff is happening in the book. It's not happening in the frame. That's what I mean by a framing narrative. The story is not the present day with the guy reading the book. The story is what's happening in the story itself. Does this make sense?
Yep.
I think for you that the present is more of a framing narrative. That means that there needs to be as little present as possible. You might even find that you want to change the balance. Like instead of 70-30, maybe it's like 75-25 or even 80-20. Like if there's any sections in the present that you don't need, cut them. You don't need a lot of framing. Now, how crucial are the events in the present?
Very.
Very.
They explain. Okay, the basic premise of the book is that something happens when he's 8 years old.
Okay.
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 And he lives with his interpretation of that event as an 18-year-old his entire as an 8-year-old his entire life.
Yeah.
And in the present is where he's realizing, wait a second, I'm 29 years old. Why is this 8-year-old controlling my life?
Right. I see. Okay. Okay. If the things happening in the present are not as engaging as the things happening in the past, here's the challenge with a story like this. The outcome is not a mystery to the reader because the outcome is the present day. So we already know what the result is going to be. The mystery is how do we get there? And what do we not know? So I think for you to keep it as engaging as possible, and again, this might not exactly answer your question because I need to read the book, but this is like a generic answer. Treat the present as just a frame, like a picture frame for the past. Chop it down as small as possible. If there's any of the present stuff that you don't need, cut it. Like keep it really tight and keep the focus of the book heavily on the past because that's where the interesting stuff is happening. In the present, use those present scenes to dangle mystery. So try to hint at things that happened that are exciting or interesting or strange, but don't tell us what they are. We need to go back into the past to find that out. If you do that, each time we arrive at the present, we're not there for too long, so we don't get bored, right? And at the same time, you've dangled something that makes us really keen to read the next section of what happened in the past. Does this make sense?
Yep.
I think that would be the best way to approach it. Just my generic.
Okay.
Is that still helpful?
Very much so.
Okay, great.
Very much so. Thank you.
Great, great. If I ever get a chance to read the rest, I'd love to. But we can talk about that another time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks so much. All right. Terry, just listening as well. That's fine. Jill. Hi, Jill. How's it going, Jill?
Hiya, Max. How you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I am busily thinking about books as a series now, which seems extremely ambitious and arrogant. And I haven't even got my report back on the first book, but there we go.
No.
But you know, if it is a series and there's there is a prime protagonist for the whole series, then I can't have him. It seems to me I can't have him on complete character arcs in each book, if you know what I mean. So there has to be like an overarch character arc through the 5-book series. See what I mean?
Yes, but I don't agree.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
Let me just finish my point.
Go ahead.
I don't mean that there is no arc in each book.
Sure.
There does need to be an arc. Like there is an arc in the first book, it's major, and he does achieve something. It's a positive ending.
Yeah.
But in the second book I'm thinking of now, I'm toying with the idea of him having a negative arc.
Sure.
So that it doesn't come right for him. And
Sure.
that could be the way to build. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
It does. Here's the best way to think about it. So what you were saying about him having a completely different arc in each book. So I think the answer is actually somewhere in between what you just described, right?
Okay.
Let's say that this is book 1 arc, then this is book 2 arc, and then this is book 3's arc, right? I want you to think about at the start of each story, what was the consequence of what happened in the previous book? Which is what's happening here. What was the consequence of it? How does that consequence start us off on a new journey? I'll give you an example. Some of you guys might know our previous client, Jennifer Vodvarka. So she wrote a really awesome fantasy trilogy that did really well. So in her first book, the character feels unworthy. And this is the flaw. And the character goes on a journey of feeling unworthy to realizing what her worth is by the end of the book. And once she realizes what her worth is, she stands up for herself and she stands up against the institution that's been oppressing her this entire time. But it has devastating consequences. So she finally makes a stand and there's a rebellion, but a lot of people die in this rebellion. And so although she's overcome her unworthiness, in book 2, this leads to a journey of guilt. Because she now has to deal with the consequences of her actions in book 1. And then once she overcomes the guilt, I can't remember what we did in book 3, but the consequences of the end of this arc leads to another journey of growth for the character. So the way to think about it is that the character is never done growing. Yes. Neither are real people, right? Stories like mirror real life, right? And the second thing is the end of one inner journey is always the beginning of a new one. We sound very philosophical now, but this is definitely the case. This is definitely the case in storytelling, right? So you can't arrive at the end of a character arc without it being the start of a new character arc. And by the way, all of this gives you a complete journey of growth across the whole series, right? So if you like, you could also give this a general theme. For example, the theme of the series is still unworthiness. The theme isn't completely resolved after the first book, but we're exploring slightly different aspects of it in each story. And each journey kind of adds to the theme. What's your character's flaw in book 1?
He's a bit of a bastard, really. He's callous, he's uncaring, thinks only of himself.
And then by the end of the first book, he's learned to care about other people, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
No?
But he has learned that other people have worth as well. That would be about it. Yeah.
That's good. Okay, so here's something interesting to think about. Being callous has advantages and it has disadvantages. The disadvantage, the advantage. If you're not close to anyone, no one can hurt you. The disadvantage, you're not close to anyone.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty lonely place to be. Starting to care about people, even if you're just starting to, is this point here.
Yeah.
And it has consequences, right? Because the great thing about caring about people is that you're not alone. But the downside about caring about people is that they can hurt you. So that's what I would think about in book 2. If he's started to have some other characters that he actually cares about, what if one of them does something? What happens now if he's betrayed? Or if he loses someone he loved? Or if all of these things are the consequences of opening up. And so you can explore that in book 2.
Nice.
That will also lead you to a stopping off point, and then you can think about book 3.
Yeah.
And that's how you're going to tackle your series. Does this make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, Max.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
My pleasure.
That's good.
My pleasure. Cool. Perfect. Plenty of food for thought.
Yay.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Sonia, did you have the same question about chapter length, or is there anything else I can help you with as well? Hey. If you're still here, Sonia. Just have to unmute yourself if you want to. Just in the bottom left of the screen. Should have an unmute button. If you can't talk right now, that's also fine. I can see that you're talking about subplot. Sonia, if you look along the bottom of your screen, how important is the subplot? Yeah. If you look along the bottom of your screen, you should have like a little microphone icon that has a line through it. If you tap it, then you can unmute. Just because I want to ask you in a bit more detail about the subplot. It's not working. Here's what I'll suggest, Sonia. I'm going to loop back to you. Can you type out the question in a bit more detail in the chat so that I understand all the context? Okay. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. So it was Sonia, and then it was... And by the way, if anyone else has a question, then you can just put the letter Q in the chat, and then I'll answer for you. Kelly, did you have a question that I can answer?
My question's kind of going off of Eric's question about past and present. So the book I'm writing is, I would say, so I'm kind of confused how I'm writing it still. It's okay. It's basically about my life and where I've gone with karate and the lessons I've learned from it.
Cool.
So how I have it structured right now and what I'm thinking is just like going chronologically, and then the lessons are at the end. But I'm confused about the past and present stuff with percentages about what you just said.
It's interesting because in all of the memoirs that we worked on, we ended up not telling them in chronological order. And I think the reason why is because, let me put it this way. So I'll try and use maybe I can use the whiteboard again. What happened to it? Can we see this? All right. So did you watch the videos that are in the classroom section that are about the 8-point story structure?
I did, and I've also been trying to use the Save the Cat ones.
Gotcha. Yeah, both of those things are good and they kind of connect to each other. So if you imagine that you've got these like beats, like these certain points in the story, like you can even think about this as like the Save the Cat beats. They're coming at certain points in the plot, right? And they're happening in a certain rhythm. You'll know if you've read Save the Cat, okay, maybe this is like the first act, right? And this is like the middle act, and then you got like the last act of the book, right? What you're going to find sometimes, if you tell in a memoir everything in exactly chronological order, is it doesn't look like this. It looks like this. Because real life was actually really messy. And in real life chronology, stuff is just all over the place. Do you see what I mean by this with moving the dots around?
Yes.
Yeah, you might find that like things in real life happened in a way that actually doesn't work that well as a story. The points are just all over the place. So how do you repair that? Well, you have a couple options. Maybe you just don't talk about a bunch of stuff that happened here. You just cut it out of the book. Doesn't happen. Or maybe you change the timeline around. So for example, if we want to start off with a beat over here, there's like a hook at the start of the story, and it's really exciting. Maybe you decide that you want to start off with the karate finals. So this is just an example. You remember the scene you shared before in the presenter page where you were like moving onto the mat, you were about to do your kata?
Right.
That was a really good scene, right? You could start the book with you moving onto the mat, you're about to do your kata, the judges are watching you, and then you snap back in time to show us how you got there. You know, this is my journey. And then you start off, and then you take us back to where it all began. And maybe that's the second beat for you. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
The thing that's most important is that it's an entertaining narrative. And if the story itself is already hitting those beats in chronological order, you can keep it in chronological order. But you might find that you can actually tell the story in a more exciting way if it's not chronological. So it might be that here's a little glimpse of the ending, and then like all these beats here, they're all chronological. And then here, like you return back to the ending again. Does it make sense?
It does. So the original thought I had was that the bulk of my story or the bulk of my book was going to be the lessons.
Yeah.
And right now that's just, it is a big part, but it's stuck at the end.
When you say the lessons, do you mean actual karate lessons, or are you talking?
No, I mean like the life lessons that I've learned from doing karate.
I lost the thread. How does it connect back to the question?
Because that's part of with the structure. I have it just chronological, and then it's like part 1 is growing up and stuff, part 2 is karate, and part 3 is the lessons I've learned.
Okay.
Where I wanted it to be like that was the gist of the story.
Okay. I think that you have to be careful about that because there's some risk that the first 2/3 of the book feel like a really engaging story, and the last third where you're sharing the lessons, there's a risk of it feeling a bit preachy. You see what I mean? So you might actually find that it works better if you sprinkle those lessons in throughout the book, and that we learn them at the same time as you learned them. Because I'm sure there were things you were learning along the way, right? Yeah, I'm sure like you didn't learn everything after the finals. So it might work better to sprinkle it in so that it doesn't feel like the end of the book is like a lot of moralizing. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. But your story sounds amazing, by the way. It really does. It's awesome. Hopefully I get to read it at some point. All right. Then let's go to Angela, then Sonia, and then
do you want to go to Sonia first since she is now working? Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure. Sonia, you got the microphone now?
Yes, I've got a microphone now, just not great with tech.
That's all right.
So I wanted to ask about the subplot. Is the subplot absolutely necessary to have a story worth reading?
The question is your subplot necessary for your story? Because there might be books where we look at subplots and think that could be cut, right? But for your book, it might actually be crucial. So let me ask you the question: would you have the same book if you cut the subplot? Would it be doing everything you want it to do, the book?
Good question. I haven't got a subplot at the minute. So
you don't? You're thinking of adding one?
I didn't know. I wasn't 100% sure if it was necessary.
The question is whether it's necessary for you, right? So the story as it is right now, does the story as it is right now feel like it's the story you're trying to tell? Or does it feel like something's missing?
No, it feels like it's a story I need to be telling. So
I don't think that adding a subplot would add much in that case.
Okay. All right.
By the way, there's one thing that we often say that answers like 90% of questions about writing, which is if you imagine that you were packing to go up a mountain and the bag's going to get heavy, so you really have to think about what you're going to pack. You can look at each part of the story and ask yourself, do I really need to take this with me?
Oh, I like that.
Well,
Yeah.
I really need to take this with me, because if the answer is no, I could still climb the mountain just as well with like all of this stuff. You probably don't need to pack it, you know? And you're going to find that very often a lot of stuff in your book. Do I need this character? Do I need this point of view? Do I need a subplot, right? The question is, would the story still work if you didn't pack that? And a lot of the time, if the answer is yes, don't do it. Just cut it.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. All right. I'll try to get through the rest of these. Because I think there's just a few more. Who did I just bounce back from before Sonia? Who told me to go to Sonia? It was Angela, wasn't it?
Me. I'll be quick.
Go ahead, go ahead.
The antagonist. On my
Yeah.
first page of my book, I try to set the scene, the setting, introduce you to the protagonist, what his issue is, and the tension and obstacles. So I can't bring the antagonist in on that first page. Is it okay if he's brought in on the second or third when he actually goes into his dream?
Did you hold on a second? So are we talking about the protagonist or the antagonist?
Yes, both.
Both.
Your earlier statement about the antagonist, I don't know if I misunderstood, but I think you said try to bring it in on the first page, and I can't
No.
do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not what I said. The antagonist, which is kind of like the opponent character.
Right.
Not the main character, but their opponent, right?
The bad guy.
That character, yeah, kind of the bad guy. That character ought to be introduced in like the first third of the book.
Oh, good. I'm
Right.
covered then.
Doesn't have to be on page one. Doesn't have to be on page one. The protagonist, the main character,
is on the first page.
I mean, yeah, the sooner the better, really, because arguably you could introduce a different character before them. Some books do that, but I think the sooner we can meet this main character and the sooner we start to care about them, the better. So page one
That's
would be,
what I did.
yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Sounds like we're all set.
This has been great today. Thanks.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Okay. All right. I'm gonna do just a few more and see if we can squeeze through the rest of these. Tom, did you have a question? Is there something you want to ask? Great to see you, by the way, Tom.
I posted the preface to my first book.
Yeah.
And one of the feedbacks I got was where the character called Friend Traveler, they didn't really connect with.
Yeah.
I don't have a name because that's supposed to be the person reading the book pretty much.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. So how could I get it to where people would connect?
Yeah. So you had some feedback that the narrator, the person telling the story, they felt like they couldn't connect with them. Is that right?
Because it talks about how the person goes for a walk and then he goes through the portal into my world.
Yeah.
And my main character meets him and calls him Friend Traveler.
Right.
And it doesn't really say a name. They're saying since he's not named, they have a hard time.
Okay, so who is it that we want the main character who is it that we want the reader to connect with ultimately? Who's the character that we're trying to get the reader to care about? I guess is my question.
It'd probably be the main character and the main of the characters in the story because you're learning the background of that realm.
That's what I figured. So I think what you're talking about is a framing narrative. What you have is a framing narrative. Did you hear me talk to Eric earlier about framing narratives?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So it's not the main story, but it's kind of like a frame around a main story. So, okay, I've got like the difficult answer for you, which you might not want to hear. And then I've got like the easier answer for you. I'll give you the difficult one first. You might not need that framing narrative at all. So you might actually find that if you go straight into the story, no framing, then the reader has an easier time connecting because that's immediately the character that they can care about, that they can connect with. So that would be the hard part. Now, I know that's a lot to ask because you're probably quite attached to that part of the story. Maybe?
Well, that's how I begin and end each book.
Yeah. So that might be difficult for you to let go, but it could be that the book actually works better without it. Maybe. I haven't read it yet, so maybe. The easier way to do it, or at least emotionally easier way to do it, right, would be if you were to give the friend traveler some qualities that we could more easily connect with. So Okay, I'll explain what causes a reader to care about a particular character. We care about a character, and this is helpful for everyone on the call. We care about a character when they have some kind of a flaw or an inner struggle that we can relate to because we've been there too, right? A lot of flaws are universal. For example, everyone's felt afraid at some point, or timid or intimidated at some point. Everyone has felt guilty about something that they did at some point, right? No one's perfect. If you can give friend traveler some kind of quality that makes us care about him, for example, he's telling us this story, but we get the sense that he's maybe on the run from something. Maybe
Right.
he's
He starts out like how people just like using him. They don't think about him unless they need something. So he had to get away and take a walk.
Okay.
So he's thinking like he should just get away from everything, and that's when he goes through the portal.
If you can lean into that and really give us a sense of like something that either makes us sympathize, makes us feel sorry for the character, makes us care about the character, they're struggling in some way, the more you lean into that, the more we'll care.
Okay.
So that might be something to consider. I still think the hard answer for you is you probably don't need the framing narrative at all, but let's experiment with this first just to see if you can keep it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Eric, I think let's try and squeeze it. We still have a bit of time. I don't have anything after this, so I might just roll on with you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. You were talking about your beats or your plot points extended out through the story.
Yeah.
And I have two plot points that are essential.
Yeah.
That occur through the chapter. And I have not found a way of pulling those apart to allow the first one to have more time to percolate before the second one happens. Okay. And so I just wanted to see if you could think of or had some general ideas of how I might be able to do that, or whether I even have to worry about it, whether it's okay that they happen so close to each other.
So again, the disclaimer, I haven't read the book. So this is going to be a very generic answer for you, right? But it seems like you're trying to create space between two events so that the first event has a little longer to sink in. When you say you want it to sink in, what do you mean by that? Are we supposed to feel like the emotional heaviness of it? Or we're supposed to see the consequences of it?
There's an emotional heaviness of it. The consequence is the rest of the book. Okay. Gotcha. And the second one, what people really haven't been getting in my book is that the second one really kind of is the thing that fixes the first one in the protagonist's mind or his personality. Okay, the second one is kind of the thing that just puts a nail in the first one.
Okay.
I'll
give you a possibility. So earlier I said that you should cut as much of the present as possible because it sounds like it's dragging. But if you're trying to create a little space between the two events, you could actually add a bit more present in order to do that. But in the place where you're adding more present, be careful because we don't want to just add filler. In other words, we don't want to add material for the sake of slowing the pace down. The reader will be able to tell and it's going to feel bloated. So we don't want to do that. What you could do, though, is have the first event happen, then have a little bit of present timeline that shows us the effect that it still has years later, and then go back to show us the second event. Example, and this is probably nothing to do with your story because I don't know your story, okay? But just an example. Let's say that the character, the first event, they were hit by a car and they were left unable to walk, for example. And then up until now in the present timeline, we haven't known this yet. You add a present scene where we see that the character now, the effect on their life. Maybe they go out to the shop and they're now in a wheelchair or they have crutches or their life looks very different to what we thought it was, right? Or for the first time, we see them leave their room and we realize that they're living with a disability now, right? And so that scene is not redundant. It actually tells us more about the character, but it also creates space because we're seeing the consequences of what happened in the past, now in the present. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Something like that might work. I might give you a completely different answer if I read the book, by the way, but that's like the generic answer for you.
Well, I'll talk to you about reading the book. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I think so. No problem. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, thank you.
And then let's get through the rest of these. Oh, you know what? I'm enjoying this, so let's keep rolling on. Amanda, you were asking how many A4 pages will be considered enough to qualify as a chapter, and exactly what Adrian said, Amanda, which is you don't want to think about things in terms of pages. You want to think about things in terms of word count. And the reason why is because if I change the font size, one page could become 5 pages because the writing's now big. You see what I mean? So pages are completely subjective. They don't mean much at all. Words, though, there's nothing you can do to change the number of words. The number of words is the number of words. It's objective, right? So try to think about it in terms of words. Now, if we answer your question again in terms of how many words would be considered enough to qualify as a chapter, there's no real rule on that. You could look at genre expectations, which is what Adrian just recommended. Look at other books in your genre, see what they're doing. But the real answer is what I said earlier in the call, which was chapter length does not matter nearly as much as how engaging the story is. In theory, you could have a book with no chapters at all. It's just one long book, but it's really gripping. It wouldn't even matter that there are no chapter breaks, right? Now, obviously, you probably don't want to do that because that's a little experimental, but you could have a chapter. I've seen books where the chapter was 2 words, but they were doing that on purpose and it worked, right? So you don't have to stick exactly rigidly to something, Amanda. Just try to make sure that the length of the chapters is serving the story. Okay. And then back to Therese.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a confession. I wrote a memoir after I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and after listening to all this, there's some excellent information here. I am seeing where chronologic might not be the best way to go about it, but I also see the need to weave in some backstory, which is a story of its own. So I don't know if that would be considered a subplot. What I'm wondering is, do you do one-on-one kind of mentoring, and how do I find out more about that? It's been sitting in my sock drawer for 12 years.
We do. You wanna know something crazy, Terry? This right here on the screen is a memoir that we helped somebody write about climbing Kilimanjaro.
Okay.
Yeah. So not only do we have experience in your genre, we have exact experience of the exact thing you're writing.
Wow.
This one even has an audiobook now, so you should
wow.
Check this out. It's called When Night Falls.
Okay.
And I think it came out really beautiful. So you can have a look at it.
Well, mine has to do with so I took a journal with me, and I journaled through the trip. So that is contributes to a major part of it. But my cousin and I went, my father passed away, and we went 1 year after his death. The two of us climbed to release him. And so there's a lot of backstory. And I taught math, but I had an English teacher friend who read it for me, and she goes, well, this makes me wonder, well, why did you go, and what happened here, and what happened here? And I realized I need to put that backstory in.
Right.
And it changes it quite significantly, and I'm not real sure how to proceed. That's why it's sitting in my sock drawer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is a bigger question that it would be good to actually do a separate call about, I think.
I think so.
Maybe we could explore that together. I can see some people heading off. I'm also myself running out of time. If anybody like Terry is curious about having some closer mentoring, if you would like me to read your whole book, or if you would like to do some one-on-one stuff together, then just say yes in the chat. And then the people who say yes, I'm going to send you a message in the group afterwards, okay? So I'll send Eric a message. I'll send Terry a message. Angela, I'll send you a message. What I want to do with you guys is we can find a time to talk separately, and we can do a one-on-one, and you can tell me a bit more about the book, and I will also read a little bit for you, okay? And then we can see if we'd be a good fit to work together more closely.
Thank you.
So thanks so much. So Eric, Angela, Therese, and Amanda. I also want to ask permission for you guys. I recorded this call. I would really like to post it so that everybody else can watch it. Possibly even on YouTube. Is there anybody that doesn't want me to post it or wants me to edit out their question from the call? Just so that I have your permission. If you don't mind, it would be great if we could keep all the questions in, because I think people can actually learn a lot. But if any, you can leave a comment in the chat if you want me to edit yours out. I'm happy to edit out anything that people don't want to be public. I'll just give a few seconds in case anybody's gonna comment. All right. All right, Sue, I'll take yours out. No problem, Sue. It was a good idea. You probably don't want people to steal it. All right. Okay, everyone else seems to be happy. Okay, no one else has any objections. That's fine. So just to remind of myself, so Eric, Angela, Therese, and Amanda, I'm going to send a message, and everyone else was happy. Okay, great. Guys, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. Don't forget, we're going to do this again in 2 weeks from now. So I would love to see you in another couple of weeks. Other than that, keep writing, keep moving forwards. Let's finish some books. See you soon. Bye for now.